Ancient relics and antiques and treasures from the Middle East are being looted and trafficked, of all places, on Facebook. That's according to a new report out today by Athar Project. It finds that extremist groups and criminal organizations are selling pieces of history to customers worldwide.
The report finds there's at least 95 Facebook groups where artifacts like mosaics, statues, and pieces of historical architecture are being sold, and many of the operations originate from war-torn countries. Katie Paul and Amar Al-Azam are both co-directors of the Athar Project. Katie is also a founding member of the Alliance to Counter Crime Online. Amar is a professor of Middle East history and anthropology at Shawnee State University. They're joining us now. So, Amar, let me start with you first. What are the biggest takeaways from your findings, and why is this report so significant?
So the biggest takeaway for us is that essentially Facebook over the years has become a massive repository of images, data, information about ongoing trafficking and looting in antiquities. And basically, this has been going on unchecked. And this platform has offered these would-be criminals, looters, terrorists, etc., a golden opportunity to conduct this activity in plain sight with no efforts to restrict or contain or even control their activity, with catastrophic results for the cultural heritage, history, artifacts, not to mention, financing of terrorist organizations, all occurring on this platform.
So listen, Katie, we have the supply here, obviously these antiques and antiquities. What about the demand? Who's buying this stuff? And what about the infrastructure? I mean, how do you determine that any of this stuff is real? How do you get the money to the seller and get the artifact to your home? I mean, how does this all work out?
Well, what we're looking at here is essentially the middleman's middleman. We're looking at a lot of people who are in the region willing to travel across borders locally to meet with one another. Sometimes they'll give one another recommendations on particular routes to take. But that doesn't mean it's just individuals in the Middle East that are actually trafficking these. There are several individuals in the United States who are very active on these trafficking pages. And we've seen instances where buyers in Europe and the United States will actually reach out to traffickers in the Middle East for particular artifacts that they would like to see trafficked out of the country. In terms of the financing, the final exchange of goods and money comes at an in-person exchange. And so that's why we're seeing a lot of regional transnational trafficking. But what's particularly concerning is that some of the admins of these closed groups on Facebook actually ask for a finder's fee, or what is essentially a coombs tax, which is what ISIS had used in its management of trafficking antiquities. So even the group admins who are not actually involved in the exchange of goods and finances make money off of these groups. And from what we can understand, that transaction is taking place digitally, because oftentimes these admins are actually not in the same location as the people selling artifacts.
So then there should be some sort of digital trail, some sort of breadcrumbs that would help law enforcement, or no?
Yes, theoretically there should be, and we've been trying to gather as much of that information as possible that's publicly available. But unfortunately, Facebook does not typically share this information with authorities, and we've gone through Facebook's community standards and commerce policies, and illicit cultural property is not in the list of banned items for commerce policies. So Facebook's not even looking for these crimes, yet we're finding large items offered in situ, which means they're still in the ground. People are actually offering extremely valuable mosaics out of Syria before they've even left the ground. Before they put in the effort to take them out, they're fielding buyers. So we're seeing a large scale of trafficking, and across the groups that we are monitoring currently, which is the 95 Arabic language groups that you mentioned, we're following more than 1.9 million members of these groups just in that region.
So, Amar, help me understand something, though. The trade in antiquities and in precious pieces of architecture, art, has gone on for time immemorial. I don't understand why these traffickers or these people would need Facebook to facilitate something that has happened, I guess, between people of wealthy means for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And added to the point that Anne-Marie and Katie were just talking about, there's a digital trail now, where I thought this stuff happened, amongst, criminals at the cafe in the Casbah.
I mean, yes, you're right. Absolutely. I mean, the trade in looted antiquities is not a new phenomenon. It's quite an old one. In fact, people have been looting and selling antiquities for as long as people have been burying their dead with goodies, and archaeological sites have been around. But what really has changed things here is social media. Social media essentially has changed the way people interact, the way people are able to access each other. The entire process of having an internet, the opening of the world, the ability to communicate at extremely high speeds, all of this has facilitated and exponentially, if you will, put this kind of activity on steroids. And then when you add to it what ISIS did back in 2014, 2015, where it took a cultural heritage looting and trafficking from the level that you described, and then both institutionalized it and then industrialized it as well. And Facebook and other social media platforms become a very important part of this process. They provide the means for this intensification and industrialization in terms of moving goods, contacting people, communicating with buyers, connecting buyers and sellers, and so on and so forth. So it's not that suddenly there was nothing and then you have this. It's the incredible facilitation that this platform provides, and the fact that Facebook and other social media platforms have been negligent in trying to suppress, control, and more importantly, restrict and disrupt this activity that is ongoing in plain sight, in front of their very eyes, and it's not, this is not dark web. You don't have to have, special resources or special skills to get at this. You or I or anyone right now in their home can, by using simple search words, immediately find these pages and groups, and then by answering one or two questions, get on there and start buying and selling. And now Facebook have also added their new feature, the market, and already we're seeing stuff showing up there. Now, I can't tell you, the few pieces I've seen, I can't tell you whether they're looted or not yet, but it's only a matter of time where that stuff will show up there. And with the new money system exchange that also Facebook is proposing, this is just going to get worse and worse and worse and worse. And Facebook has yet to recognize that it has a problem and then start addressing this problem by agreeing to share and work with entities, organizations, both official and unofficial, like ourselves, to start to develop a coherent strategy to disrupt and to break up this terrible trade.
I think this is a good time to read to the viewers the Facebook statement. Facebook released a statement to the New York Times saying, quote, continuing to invest in people and technology to keep this activity off Facebook and encourage others to report anything they suspect of violating our community standards so we can quickly take action. The company said that it has removed dozens of these pages. However, in the report, you guys highlight the need for Facebook to refrain from actually deleting these groups and posts and instead report them to authorities. Is Facebook not treating this like a crime instead of treating it like something sort of bothersome on their platform?
No, it's not. And really, this is not the only trafficking crime that's happening. We are seeing weapons offered for sale in these groups. We're seeing wildlife parts, elephant tusks. And the Alliance to Counter Crime Online actually follows a wide black market trade in drugs, wildlife, even human remains, all of it taking place on Facebook. And Facebook has yet to acknowledge that any of these are actual problems on the platform. And while their statement does mention anything that violates their community standards, there's nothing in their community standards or commerce policies about illicit cultural property.
Katie, would terrorists be so bold as to use Facebook to conduct nefarious transactions?
Absolutely. We actually identified 3 different terrorist groups that are not ISIS that are offering artifacts openly on these pages. And when you go to the profiles of these individuals, it's very clear that they are affiliated with terrorist groups. There are particular signals, logos of different terrorist groups like Hayat Tahrir al-Sham that they will include in their profiles to indicate who they work with. And so, yes, absolutely they're operating. And what's extremely concerning is that this is the first digital space we've seen where extremists are engaging with the average public. And that's something that is not typical. Usually they work with like-minded individuals. So now we have a concerning issue of terrorists and average citizens commingling in the same digital space, which could open up more recruiting for terrorist groups.
I was just going to say, I suppose it's not surprising. I mean, how many times have we talked about how terrorist groups use Facebook to recruit, how they lure people in?
Right.
So they're very active in this space. They know what words to use to get the attention of the desired audience and avoid the attention of anyone who may, yank them off the site.
Yeah. It's really, but now you're adding the extra layer of perhaps financial transactions being negotiated on Facebook, and which is different than, hey, enticing some, 17-year-old minor or, some young person to go and fight in Syria.
And when you guys talk about, the opening up of the marketplace, right? So now there's infrastructure on Facebook to, pass money back and forth. And Facebook sort of continues to expand, reaching further and further into our world, right? You can now live stream and have conversations with multiple people at the same time. Right. You don't have to do that over your cell phone anymore. You can do it all through Facebook. So it is not surprising that groups would look for ways to manipulate and exploit this platform.
Yes, absolutely.
This has been a fascinating discussion. Katie Paul and Amar Al-Azam, thank you both so much. Really, really interesting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.